John Hellman, I'll start with you. We were talking earlier in the show about a story I penned last night for The Atlantic, noting that in the wake of the Venezuela strike, Trump is now pure id. Sort of he and his aides see this as evidence that his power is largely unchecked. He steamrolled Congress, didn't even bother notifying them about the strikes in Caracas. And we have seen him now threaten Greenland, consider intervention in Iran, saying that they're going to maintain a presence in Venezuela, running that country for years to come, perhaps, and siding with the ICE agents and flooding Minnesota with more masked officers in the wake of that shooting. And as we just mentioned, his administration is now launching a criminal probe into Jerome Powell. This is Trump, hijacking the news cycle, to be sure, but also wielding executive power in new and potentially, some would say, dangerous ways.
Happy New Year, John. And it's good to see you here. Bring up your story. If you had not brought it up, I was going to bring up your story. If you hadn't mentioned it, you could have just waited. You could have stepped back and just let me do it. It would have been maybe a little bit more graceful. But look, the story is great because it sums up a moment. Story sums up a moment really well. And I think it raises the following question, right? You can look at what Trump has done in this last week and see a kind of spur of authoritarian aggression. You can look at what he's done over the course of since the start of the year and see an attempt to do what he's done many times in the past, which is throw a lot of spaghetti against the wall, throw out a lot of bright shining objects, whatever your preferred metaphor is, to try to get people to be distracted, to get the media, to get Democrats, get the left, get everyone to pay attention to things other than stuff that Trump doesn't want to talk about, like the Epstein files or the question of economics, right? Those, as Joe is fond of saying, both things can be true at the same time. They can, we have no false binaries on this show. And I think the question that it raises for Democrats is how to handle that. To me, there's a strategic question here. There's a lot of things to condemn in what Donald Trump has done. There's clearly a lot of things he's doing to try to distract people. But as we head into the year of the 2026 midterms, how do Democrats decide not just what's signal and what's noise, but what's political signal and what they need to focus on as the weeks and months ahead unfold? That's going to determine. I mean, the Republicans are in a terrible place right now with these midterm elections. But, with Trump doing all of this stuff, Democrats need to be disciplined about what they want to focus on. And I don't think that they yet know exactly what the right plan is here in the face of this kind of unprecedented moment that we're living in that you write about, John.
Well, and John Heilman, you can do two things at once. You can say, yep, Donald Trump invaded Venezuela and said he was going to keep the oil. I'm not exactly sure how that stops him from breaking the law on doing what Congress said he had to do with the Epstein files. Donald Trump said he was going to take Greenland one way or another. I don't know how that gets your grocery bills down. I don't know how that gets your rent down or your home heating oil down. Donald Trump said, and we should take him at his own words, that he should have seized the voting machines in 2020. Well, I sure hope Democratic lawyers and I sure hope the DNC is preparing for that eventuality, because he's going to try to do it and it needs to be stopped before he does it. But while they're doing that, what we need to focus on is affordability. We need to focus on affordability in your grocery bills, affordability in your heating bills, affordability in your housing bills, and also accountability on the Epstein files, not because it's something that MAGA base wants, but because it is now the law of the land. They have to do these two things at once, I think, but there is no doubt. Talking about seizing Venezuela, having ICE agents shoot a young mother point blank in the face from the side of the car 2 of 3 times, talking about invading Greenland. All of these things are chaos, and I wouldn't call them ground noise because they're extraordinarily important. But what are voters focused on? They're focused on that chaos in that it stops Donald Trump and it stops Republicans from doing job one. And that is making their lives better and making their groceries, their heating bills, and their rent more affordable. And they're not doing that.
Joe, I'll say Happy New Year to you too, and throw you a bouquet here and say, if every Democrat was as politically adroit and as good at communications as you are, I think there wouldn't be a challenge here, right? You are good at doing this thing where you kind of fold in all of these things and keep the eye on the ball of what the political focus should be about what matters to Americans without ignoring the various kind of constitutional and civil liberties transgressions that the administration is undertaking, and folding all that into a single message. It's a lot harder than it looks when you watch someone who's good at doing it as you are on television. I would say there are a lot of Democrats and a lot of Republicans, clearly, who aren't that adroit, and so they find it harder to focus on the things that matter to voters while also not ignoring all the other stuff that's going on. But I just say that is, I think, the challenge. That is what Democrats will find it hard to do, because on the question, for example, of Jerome Powell, a good example, right? I don't think very many voters care in the abstract about the independence of the Fed. If you present the issue that way, it just goes right past them, right? But if the economy tanks because of the challenge to Jerome Powell, they'll understand that. Now, that's a pretty easy example about the difference between signal and noise politically. But there are a lot of them that are harder, that are more challenging to message. And I think Democrats right now, as they start this new year, are trying to figure out how to play what turned out to be a pretty good 2025 for them and keep that ball moving forward, as Donald Trump, in a position of extraordinary political weakness, is acting like he often does when he's politically weak, which is he's a caged animal, and he's more dangerous in some ways when he's weak than when he's strong.
Well, I do think, John Lemire, that the key for Democrats is to keep the focus on what voters have said the focus needs to be on, and that is affordability. That is their quality of life. Now, that doesn't mean, though, that the chaos of Greenland, the chaos of Jay Powell, the chaos of Donald Trump saying we're going to seize the oil, the chaos of oil companies saying, no, I don't think we're ready, the chaos of hearing somebody in the administration say, well, we may just seize the oil companies. All of that chaos, that is ground noise that rises up and makes voters understand that Republicans aren't focused on them. Republicans aren't focused on making their grocery bills more affordable. Republicans aren't focused on helping young Americans get into a home before they're 45 years old, for God's sake. That it doesn't help people pay their heating oil. It doesn't help, and this is happening right now, middle-class Americans having to decide whether they're going to pay for their family's health insurance for this month or pay their mortgage late or default on their rent. Those are the choices that are happening while we're talking about nuke Greenland, while we're talking about Minneapolis, while ICE agents are going around pushing Americans around saying, have you learned your lesson? Have you learned your lesson from, us shooting Renee Good? Haven't you learned your lesson yet? That pulls a lot of Americans back. What are they doing in Caracas? What are they doing in Minneapolis? I want them to focus on making my life more affordable. That's what they say when you knock on their doors and talk to them. And I know, because I knocked on 10,000 plus doors during my political career. And that's what it comes down to at the end.
Yeah, this burst of activity from the administration in the last 2 weeks, certainly very little of it having to do with prices and affordability. And it reinforces this idea, as you say, that Trump is distracted. But of course, some of these things are meant to be distractions, but some of them are very real. Greenland, if he tries to, whether it's a military operation or pressure or coercion, does indeed try to acquire Greenland, well, that would shatter the NATO alliance. That is real, too. We have had to believe that Trump says what he means. And David Drucker